Right, we've had a few requests for this. Okay, welcome to the Gadget Show podcast. Brand new feature, the Wall of Shame. Now, this is where we take
Nice.
a look at, yes, tech and gadgets that didn't quite get off the mark. I mean, there's been a few, hasn't there? Whether they've overpromised, underdelivered, or were just downright wrong. And to help us decide which gadget deserves a spot on the wall, we've got none other than the legend that is Otis Daily.
How you guys doing?
Yeah, good. Better for seeing you. Thank you so much. What have
Do
you
you know
been
what
up
I mean?
to? What have you been up to since we last saw you on this here podcast?
I had a most epic summer, but that's a personal thing. Let's talk about work. Currently recording a brand new series of Shop Smart, Save Money, which will be on your telly boxes, or is on your telly boxes, Wednesdays, Channel 5, 7 o'clock. Figure out how to spend your cash properly.
Right. I love you both very much, but because I'm in Australia, it's nighttime. So shall we move on?
Yeah, let's move on.
Absolutely.
Okay, excellent. Right. Shall we start with the Microsoft Zune?
Oh, good choice, Susie. The Zune. Yeah, why it flopped. I mean, it flopped, didn't it?
Well, yeah, because obviously it was going to try and take on the iPod, wasn't it? And it just came in a bit too late. It was chunky, clunky software, lack of distinguishing features, I would say, and had a really awkward marketing campaign. So, despite some loyal fans, it could not compete with Apple's dominance, could it?
The one redeeming feature that I remember about the Zune is more recent in that do you remember it made an appearance in one of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies? Do you remember that?
Yes, it did. It did. And I mean, you say redeeming. I mean, that still doesn't mean that the device was any good. I mean, it's now in sort of Marvel MCU folklore.
Yeah.
But it was still, it just couldn't compete, could it? Really? I mean, the iPod was already dominating by this point.
Something interesting that I'm reading in my notes, which I'm going to be honest, I wasn't aware of, but this is very cool. That the last wave of Zunes, the sort of the most recent software update, which I think was in 2008, brought with it games. You could play Hexic and Texas Hold'em, as well as the function to enjoy audiobooks on it. That's quite interesting, isn't it? They were obviously looking to kind of, I don't know, appeal to the kind of Xboxer in all of us.
Here's my second suggestion then. Google Glass, which you know I was not a fan. 2013 they came out. I cannot believe that was more than 10 years ago. That is crazy.
Isn't that nuts?
Did you try them, Otis, at the time? Because we had them on the Gadget Show for a few weeks in the office.
No, I didn't get to try them. But I don't know if this should feature. I mean, yes, they tanked as a product, but I fully believe we weren't ready for them. They were ahead of their time. I mean, if you look at the bunch of releases we've got now, you know, Jason, earlier on off pod, you mentioned Orion. We've had the pair from Ray-Ban. Snapchat had a pair as well.
Yeah, they're really invested in it, aren't they, Snapchat?
Yeah, they really want it to happen. And I know you're passionate about mobile phone devices just not being a great idea. You want to integrate your technology.
Yeah, that's one of my key themes.
With your reality.
I feel foolish holding an Egyptian tablet next to my face.
Yeah, I think they were ahead of their time, and I would argue they don't belong on the Wall of Shame.
Okay, I would argue they do belong on the Wall of Shame, but I really love the fact that you've gone with a different, an unexpected angle on that. And I'll tell you why. I mean, because I use them.
Yes.
I remember walking around Digbeth in Birmingham, which for those people listening and watching is where the Gadget Show podcast is currently filmed, and it's where all the episodes of the Gadget Show proper, with us lot in it, was filmed. And it's a really cool sort of urban industrial area. It's actually where Peaky Blinders, the real Peaky Blinders and the TV series is filmed, so you'll get that sort of vibe. So walking around those streets with this device on my face, I can only say it was something akin to if you opened your letterbox, right, and then you stuffed in some tracing paper, right, and then someone came into your driveway and you had to identify them by kneeling down, looking through the letterbox, through the tracing paper, you'd see that there's someone there. It was maybe a bit better than that, and it had some sort of navigational functionality that I can remember. You know, the field of view is the thing that was the main issue. And that's also the issue on other augmented reality devices or mixed reality devices like HoloLens from Microsoft. This has always been a thing. And that's why, I've actually got it here, actually. I've got one of my many VR helmets right in front of me. I'm holding it up for those people listening, the Quest 3. And with the cameras on the front there, look, and you can see, if you're watching, those are the pass-through cameras. They give me a field of view that is wide enough for me to be fully immersed and to forget about the borders, like the end of the cinema screen. And that's not what Google Glass did, is it, Suze?
No, I think, you've explained it pretty well there in a comedy style, but they were very expensive. There was a massive privacy issue with them, but obviously they weren't ever on the market. They didn't go to market. They weren't a commercial product. They didn't quite get there. They realised that they were, as you said, ahead of the time.
Anyway, I'm sure we've got some other wall of shamers.
What about from 1993 going right back there, the Apple Newton, the personal digital assistant, which was, pretty revolutionary in concept, but was hampered obviously by poor handwriting recognition and a high price, which seems to be something that we're talking about a lot. And it got mocked at the time and became a symbol of early tech failures, really, before it got discontinued 3 years later. What about that?
Oh, hey, Otis. So you were a member of the CBBC crew, weren't you? I'm right on it?
Yes, I was. CBBC, yeah.
So in an early part of my career, I know you know this, Otis, but maybe, Susie, you're not so familiar with this. I actually worked for Children's BBC, and I was a trainee producer for the BBC for like 2 years, and I worked on Live and Kicking. And what I tried to do as this sort of like, super keen junior researcher was bring more video games and more gadgets onto, BBC Saturday morning TV, kids TV. And I remember I had this sort of battle with the editor where I'd always be saying, we need more video games. And I got the Apple Newton onto that show, and it was on Live and Kicking. Oh, wow. And the only reason I did it was so I could get one. I could say, hi, I'm from the BBC, can you send me an Apple Newton, please? and so I played with it and spent a few weeks before I had to send it back, fiddling around with it. And I always liked it. I tell you what was interesting. The big selling point for the Apple Newton was its handwriting recognition, which even, as you know, even today is a bit of a thing. Like, it doesn't really work brilliantly, although, forgive me, if someone listening or watching realizes there is a great natural handwriting recognition software solution out there that I've not come across, then fair enough. It's not an area of my expertise. But I know that for many years it's been difficult. They tried it, and it wasn't terrible. You had to sort of...
It was!
Or was it? Okay, go...
It's one of the reasons why it failed, because the handwriting recognition was so bad. I mean, you're basically speaking other languages with it without realizing, and they're all made up.
Well, I was going to complete that statement. I wasn't going to just leave it there. I was going to say it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great. That's the point I was trying to make. And I remember, a bit like the Palm Pilot, as I seem to remember, you had to... You couldn't just write in your own handwriting. You had a combination of that and certain types of ways of doing letters, that were easier for it to understand. And then you got a kind of relatively okay input, interface, if that makes sense.
I don't know if you guys remember, another nail in the coffin of the device was its inclusion in an episode of The Simpsons. Two of Bart's bullies typed into or wrote on their Newton device, and it translated it to eat up Martha. I mean, if something fails on The Simpsons or it's ridiculed on The Simpsons, then that's it.
It's finished. Yeah, you're finished. That's really it's true. I do remember, but I remember struggling with it, and I think maybe I wanted the handwriting input to be better than it was, because my kind of early adopter gene is so prominent that I sometimes, I still feel it now, like with say, augmented reality glasses that are being touted. I will them to work. But you're right, Susie, it wasn't great. All I mean is it wasn't as bad as everyone makes out. You could learn the ways of the device.
Sometimes, Jace, I think that your AR glasses are rose tinted.
Yeah, nice.
He's got rose-tinted AR glasses.
Yeah, I'm guilty of that, Sue.
Right, your next one then, Nokia Engage, 2003. What do you reckon?
Oh, I loved it. I loved it.
Right. What did you love about it? Because the device, there was just too much going on. How did you even decipher what you were meant to be doing? The design's awful. Trying to play on my Engage.
No, look, so that people listening, watching, understand, in case you're not OG and you, or you are OG but you never had one. The answer to your question is that it was in a different format to every other phone, virtually, apart from the communicator. It was let's say landscape as opposed to portrait in orientation, and it felt like holding to be fair to you, Otis, relatively complex, overly buttoned game controller. So for me, I had a gamepad in my pocket rather than a phone, and it looked cool. It had that kind of mine was a kind of gunmetal grey, with a kind of like faux carbon fibre vibe going on.
That's the classic model.
And I think you slot in little cartridges into it.
It was a multimedia card, wasn't it?
Right. Okay. Yeah. So you bought the games, didn't you? That was the thing. And I was, buying games from a phone, and it was like, it was having a pocket-sized kind of Game Boy, or a bit more like a Game Gear, actually, more like the Sega Game Gear, wasn't it? But it was miniature, and you could literally fit it in your back pocket. The thing that we need to remember, folks, is that phones back then were smaller than phones are now. I thought it was beautiful. I'd get one now. I tell you what I'd like to do. I'd like to get that, and I'd also like to get the banana phone. You remember the banana phone from Nokia?
Banana phone all day.
Yeah, and I'd like some cool, hardware engineer to hack it so that I could have a modern Android operating system on it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But in the case of the old school Engage, or in that case, banana phone, that would be a brilliant thing.
I think it's fair to say some of those product designers at Nokia really did have an eye on the future, and it's not the only device. You mentioned the banana phone. There were a couple of other handsets that had a very different design to what was common among smartphones. I salute them for that, definitely.
But it's on the wall of shame, Susie. So my enthusiasm is obviously misplaced.
Well, it had a very poor library of games, so that's why it's on the wall of shame, really. And you had to hold it sideways, and it was a bit awkward. So there it is.
And don't forget, you looked absolutely bloody ridiculous making a phone call. No, you
Never
did.
bothered me.
It was called a taco for a while. You like walking around with a taco, which I don't put past you.
Yeah, fair cop.
Okay.
And I want to do this one quite quickly, and I think we can, because it's really obvious. And I'm just suggesting the segue, because it just looked so flipping ridiculous.
I mean, it was plagued by human catastrophe, wasn't it? I mean, what's the world record for the longest time anyone has stayed on a Segway? It's probably like 15 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, Otis. I agree. I seriously injured my knee on a Segway and almost dislocated my knee.
Full disclosure, confession here. I've never been on one. They never looked right. I know I'm going to be cast out from the tech familiar, but I couldn't invest. I just couldn't risk my corporeal safety by jumping on one of those things.
Yes, but from the Segway experiment came so many great, accelerometer, based transport solutions.
Agreed. The one wheel.
Like the one wheel, exactly, which we've featured on this podcast. Anyway, what's the final wall of shamer, Susie?
Okay, we're going back to the mid-70s. Are you ready?
Sony Betamax, 1975, that massive argument.
No, take it off. No argument. It does not belong on the wall of shame. No.
Expand. I'm really interested.
Okay, so it lost the PR campaign because Sony's Betamax went up against the VHS. But my dad, this is the only time my dad has ever been an early adopter of technology. He bought a Sony Betamax VCR, so video cassette recorder. It recorded in great quality. It played in great quality. The problem with being an early adopter of the Sony Betamax was that format lost the war. VHS won. It was cheaper, more readily available, easier to produce. And so the VHS ran off with the market. That killed the Sony Betamax as a commercial entity, as a commercial device. But behind the scenes, the Betamax was the format of choice for making television programs, for recording and editing. All of that stuff was recorded onto a Betamax tape. I've got hundreds of them in the room next door with my show reels on, with clips of.
I don't want to wind you up, mate, but
everything. Is that on Betamax? Right. I'll take it off you now.
No, sorry, mate. And this one also, yeah, on VHS, my friend. By the way, if you're listening, I just held up Ferris Bueller's Day Off and Terminator on VHS.
Classic.
VHS did win the war. Betamax was the superior quality.
In technology, sometimes superior quality does not always win the day. So now is the time to choose the gadget for our wall of shame. And Otis, as you are our very special guest, it's on you.
Okay, well, let me say this. All bar one of the devices we've discussed have had at least one person pitching for it in terms of trying to save it from going on the wall. Impassioned pleas of some of the positivities that these devices brought. And there was one device that unanimously, from the three of us, absolutely flopped the show. Without question, deserves its place on the wall of shame, because there are no upsides, there are no positives, apart from the fact that, it led the way for some of the more sophisticated personal forms of transport that we have now. It's the Segway, man. The Segway goes up. It goes up on the wall, a deserved place on the wall of shame.
That's the only time I'm ever going to applaud the Segway.
I think that's a fair result.
Well, thank you, Otis, for putting our first gadget on the wall of shame. We could not think of anybody better. You did a fine job, my friend, and it's gorgeous to see you.
Thank you very much. Absolute pleasure, as always. Just one favour, you two. The next time we do this, can we do it in a nice sort of huggable, snuggable space together?
Yeah, the Gadget Show podcast studio. How about that?
Rather than you down in Cornwall, you down
and me
under.
Down under.
Yeah. And me in my IKEA office.
See you, mate. Good to see you.
Love you guys.